The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside Bitter Creek, and Rhea Calloway didn't wait for the driver to help her down. She never did. Asking for help meant giving people a reason to stare, and they stared enough already. Her left leg dragged as she gripped the doorframe, the old injury flaring hot beneath layers of skirt and petticoat. The driver, a narrow-faced man who'd spent the last 30 miles pretending she didn't exist, finally glanced her way. "Need a hand, ma'am?" "No." She dropped to the ground harder than she intended, dust puffing up around her boots. Pain shot through her hip, sharp and familiar. She stood there breathing through it while the driver hauled her trunk down and dumped it in the dirt without ceremony. "That'll be all then." He was already climbing back up. Rhea looked at the trunk, then at the town. Bitter Creek wasn't much. A main street of sun-bleached wood, a general store, a saloon with a sagging porch, and a scatter of buildings that looked like they'd been thrown together by men in a hurry to get drunk. Exactly the kind of place that wouldn't want her. She picked up the trunk by its leather handle and started walking. Her gait was uneven, the left leg stiff and reluctant, and she felt eyes on her immediately. A woman sweeping her porch stopped mid-stroke. Two men outside the saloon went quiet, watching. A child pointed until his mother yanked his arm down. This was the part Rhea hated most. Not the injury itself, she'd made peace with that years ago, but the way people looked at her like she was a broken thing, a mistake that shouldn't be walking around in daylight. The general store was dim and smelled of tobacco and leather. Behind the counter, a gray-haired man with suspicious eyes looked up from his ledger. "Help you?" "I'm looking for the Voss Ranch. Been hired on as cook." His eyebrows went up. "You're the cook Ethan sent for?" "That's right." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her size, her limp, the plain, worn fabric of her dress. Whatever he was thinking, he kept it off his face, but Rhea had learned to read silence. It said plenty. "Ranch is 6 miles northwest. Follow the main road till you see the fence line, then head toward the hills. Can't miss it." "Thank you." She turned to leave. "Ma'am?" Rhea stopped. "That leg of yours, you going to be able to manage a ranch kitchen? It's hard work, long hours." "I'll manage. Because if Ethan Voss is expecting..." "He's expecting a cook," Rhea said quietly, "and that's what he'll get." She left before he could say more. The walk to the ranch took 3 hours. By the time she saw the fence line, her leg was screaming and sweat had soaked through her undergarments. She stopped to catch her breath, leaning against a fence post while the sun hammered down on her shoulders. The Voss Ranch sprawled across the valley like something that had grown wild and been beaten into submission. Corrals, barns, a bunkhouse, and a main house that looked sturdy but plain. Cattle dotted the hills beyond, and she could see men working near the barn, small figures moving with purpose. She forced herself to keep walking. By the time she reached the yard, 3 men had stopped what they were doing to watch her approach. They didn't say anything, just stood there with their tools hanging loose in their hands, expressions ranging from curious to doubtful. Rhea stopped in front of them. "I'm looking for Ethan Voss." The tallest one, a lean man with a sun-scorched face and eyes like chipped stone, nodded toward the barn. "He's inside." "Thank you." She moved past them, feeling their stares follow her. Heard one of them mutter something low, followed by a stifled laugh. She kept walking. The barn was cooler, full of shadow and the smell of hay and horse sweat. A man stood near the back, examining a saddle that hung from a post. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair going gray at the temples and hands that looked like they'd been working since childhood. He glanced up as she approached. "Mr. Voss?" "That's right." His voice was deep, quiet. He looked her over the same way the store owner had, but his face was harder to read. "You're the cook." "Rhea Calloway." He nodded once. "Letter said you had experience." 10 years, worked kitchens in Denver, a logging camp in Montana, and a railroad crew in Wyoming. "Why'd you leave?" "Got hurt. They didn't need a cook who couldn't keep pace." Ethan's gaze dropped to her leg, then back to her face. "This work isn't easy either." "I know. I've got 8 men here full-time, sometimes more during roundup. They eat 3 meals a day, and they eat a lot. You'll be up before dawn and working past dark most days." "I can do it." "Can you?" There was no cruelty in the question, just a flat assessment. Because I've got men who depend on good food to keep working. If you can't handle it, I need to know now. Rhea met his eyes. I didn't come here to fail, mister. Voss, you need a cook? I need work. I'll do the job. He studied her for another long moment, then nodded. Kitchen's in the main house. I'll show you. The kitchen was bigger than she'd expected. Solid wood counters, a cast iron stove, shelves stocked with dry goods, and a heavy table scarred from years of use. A door led to a small room off the back with a cot, a washstand, and a narrow window. You'll stay here, Ethan said. Meals are at 6, noon, and 7. Men eat in the bunkhouse. You'll ring the bell when it's ready. Understood. Supply run is every 2 weeks. Make a list if you need anything. I will. He turned to leave, then stopped. Miss Calloway? Yes? The men are going to talk. They're going to doubt. Don't let it get to you. It won't. He almost smiled. Almost. We'll see. That first night, Rhea didn't sleep. She lay on the cot staring at the ceiling, her leg throbbing in time with her pulse. The room was silent except for the creak of wood settling and the distant sound of cattle. She thought about the men she'd seen, the way they'd looked at her, and she knew exactly what they were thinking. She'd heard it all before. Too fat, too slow, too damaged. A liability, not an asset. But Rhea had learned something in her 34 years. People's doubts meant nothing if you didn't feed them. And the fastest way to shut people up was to do the work they said you couldn't. She got up before dawn. The kitchen was dark, so she lit the lamps and got the stove going. Her movements were automatic, years of muscle memory guiding her hands while her mind planned the day. Breakfast for 8 men meant biscuits, bacon, eggs, and strong coffee. Simple, filling, and fast. By the time the sky started to lighten, the smell of bacon filled the kitchen and biscuits were browning in the oven. She moved around the space, testing her limits, figuring out where she could stand without her leg giving out, where she needed to brace herself. The stove was positioned well. She could work there without moving much. The counter was too high for comfort, but she'd manage. At 6 sharp, she rang the bell. The men came in slowly, wary and quiet. They filled the bunkhouse table, watching her through the window as she loaded plates. She could feel their judgment like a weight on her shoulders, but she kept her face neutral and her hands steady. When she carried the first tray out, the tall man from yesterday, she'd learned his name was Caleb, looked up. That's a lot of food. You're a lot of men. Someone snorted. Another man, broad and red-faced, frowned at his plate. Biscuits look burnt. They're not. He took a bite, chewed slowly, and said nothing. Rhea set down the rest of the plates and went back for coffee. When she returned, the men were eating. Not talking, not smiling, but eating. That was enough for now. The days fell into a rhythm. Up before dawn, breakfast, clean the kitchen, prep for lunch. Lunch, clean again, prep for dinner, dinner, clean, collapse, repeat. Her legs screamed constantly. By the end of the first week, she could barely walk by nightfall. But she didn't slow down, didn't ask for help, didn't give them a reason to say she couldn't handle it. The men didn't talk to her much. They came in, ate, and left. But she noticed small things. Plates coming back empty. Second helpings disappearing. The big man, whose name was Garrett, stopped complaining after the 3rd day. Caleb started nodding when she set his plate down. And Ethan, quiet, watchful Ethan, didn't say anything, but she caught him watching her sometimes. Not with judgment, but with something closer to curiosity. On the 10th day, everything changed. She was in the kitchen prepping dinner when she heard shouting outside. Not the usual banter of men working. This was sharp, urgent. She moved to the window and saw a group of riders coming up the road from town. 5 men, moving fast, and they didn't look friendly. Ethan was already walking toward them, Caleb and another man flanking him. Rhea wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside, staying near the porch. The riders stopped in a cloud of dust. The man in front was older, with a thick gray beard and a badge pinned to his vest. The sheriff. Ethan, the sheriff said, his voice cold. Harlan, heard you hired on a new cook. That's right. The sheriff's eyes found Rhea. She felt the weight of his stare, the calculation behind it. That her? It is. Harlan dismounted, his men following suit. He walked toward the porch slowly, like a man inspecting livestock. When he was a few feet away, he stopped and looked Rhea up and down. You're the cook. Yes. What's your name? Rhea Calloway. Where you from, Miss Calloway? Here and there? That's not an answer. It's the one I'm giving. His jaw tightened. You got papers? Proof of employment? Mr. Voss hired me. That's all the proof I need. See, that's where you're wrong. Harlan's voice dropped and Rhea felt the threat in it. This town has certain standards. We don't take kindly to drifters, especially ones who look like they can't pull their weight. I'm not a drifter. I'm a cook. You're a cripple. He said it flat, like stating a fact. And I'm here to tell you, you're not welcome. The words hit her like a slap, but she didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low and hard. That's enough, Harlan. I'm doing my job. Your job is keeping the peace, not harassing people. My job, Harlan said slowly, is protecting this town from undesirables. And she, he pointed at Rhea, is exactly that. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Rhea's hands clenched at her sides. She wanted to scream, to curse, to tell this man exactly what she thought of him. But she knew better. Losing her temper wouldn't help. It never did. Instead, she looked him in the eye and said quietly, I'm not leaving. Harlan smiled, and it was the ugliest thing she'd seen in a long time. We'll see about that. He turned and walked back to his horse, his men following. They mounted up and rode off, leaving nothing behind but dust and the promise of trouble. Ethan stood watching them go, his jaw tight. When he finally turned to Rhea, his expression was unreadable. You should have stayed inside. I don't hide. Maybe you should start. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing on the porch with her heart pounding and her hands shaking. That night, the men were quieter than usual. They ate quickly, avoiding her eyes, and when they left, the kitchen felt emptier than before. Rhea cleaned in silence, scrubbing plates with more force than necessary. Her mind churned. She'd known this would happen. It always did. Towns didn't like outsiders. They especially didn't like outsiders who didn't fit their idea of useful. But she'd meant what she said. She wasn't leaving. She was drying the last plate when the door opened. Ethan stood in the doorway, hat in hand. Got a minute? Rhea set the plate down. If this is about the sheriff, it's not. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I wanted to say you're doing good work. She blinked. What? The men are eating better than they have in months. No complaints. That's rare. They don't talk to me. They don't talk to anyone much. But they're eating, and that means they're working better. That's what matters. Rhea didn't know what to say. Praise wasn't something she was used to. Ethan leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful. Harlan's going to be a problem. I know. He'll pressure the town to cut off your supplies, make things difficult. Let him. Miss Calloway, I've dealt with worse. Ethan studied her for a long moment. I believe you, but this isn't just about you. If the town turns against you, it affects the whole ranch. Then maybe you should have hired someone else. Maybe. He straightened, putting his hat back on. But I didn't, and I don't make a habit of firing people who do their job well. He left before she could respond, the door clicking shut behind him. Rhea stood in the empty kitchen, his words echoing in her mind. It wasn't much, just a few sentences, but it was more than anyone had given her in a long time. She turned off the lamps and limped to her room, her leg aching worse than ever. Tomorrow would be another hard day. The day after that, even harder. But she'd survived worse. And she'd survived this too. 2 weeks passed, and the trouble Ethan had warned about arrived like clockwork. Rhea made her supply list and handed it to Caleb, who was heading into town. He took it without comment, but when he returned that evening, his face was grim. Store wouldn't sell to me. Rhea looked up from the stove. What? Said they're not doing business with the ranch anymore. Not while you're here. Her stomach dropped. Did they say why? They didn't have to. Caleb tossed the list on the table. Harlan's behind it. He's been talking to the merchants, telling them not to serve you. That's illegal. Maybe. But it's happening. Rhea stared at the list, her mind racing. No supplies meant no food. No food meant the men couldn't work. And if the men couldn't work, the ranch would fail, all because of her. I'll talk to them, she said quietly. That's not a good idea. I don't care. I'm not letting this place suffer because of me. Miss Calloway, I'm going. The next morning, she hitched a ride with one of the ranch hands and made the trip into town. Her leg was already aching by the time they arrived, but she ignored it. The general store was busy, full of people picking up supplies. Rhea walked in, and the place went quiet. Every head turned. Every eye found her. The store owner, the same gray-haired man from her first day, looked up from the counter, his expression hardening. We're closed. Your sign says open. Not to you. Rhea walked to the counter, her limp pronounced in the silence. I need supplies. Can't help you. Why not? Because I don't want your business. That's not a reason. It's reason enough. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. You're not welcome here, Miss Calloway. The sooner you understand that, the better. Rhea felt the weight of every stare, the heat of every judgment. But she didn't back down. I'm not leaving. Then you'll starve. No. A voice said from the doorway. She won't. Everyone turned. Ethan stood in the entrance, his expression cold and hard. He walked past Rhea to the counter, his boots loud in the silence. You've got a problem with my cook? You've got a problem with me. The store owner's face flushed. Ethan, this isn't... I don't care what Harlan told you. You sell to me, you sell to her. That's how it works. We have the right to refuse, and I have the right to take my business elsewhere. Ethan's voice was quiet, but it carried. There's a new store opening in Red Bluff. Closer to my ranch, anyway. I'm sure they'd be happy to have a steady customer. The store owner's jaw worked. Rhea could see the calculation in his eyes. Losing the Voss Ranch's business would hurt. Badly. Finally, he looked at Rhea and said through gritted teeth, What do you need? Rhea handed him the list. They didn't talk on the ride back. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the reins while Rhea sat beside him trying to make sense of what had just happened. He'd stood up for her, not because he liked her, she doubted he even knew her well enough for that, but because it was the right thing to do. That was rare. Thank you, she said finally. Ethan glanced at her. For what? You know what? He shrugged. Can't run a ranch without supplies. It was more than that. Was it? He looked back at the road. You do good work, Miss Calloway. I'm not letting a bunch of small-minded fools ruin that. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but something had shifted. Rhea couldn't name it, couldn't define it, but she felt it. A crack in the wall between them. Small, barely there, but real. A month passed, then another. The town's hostility didn't fade, but it became background noise. Rhea focused on the work, cooking, cleaning, learning the rhythms of the ranch. She learned that Garrett liked his coffee black and strong, that Caleb had a sweet tooth he tried to hide, that the youngest hand, a kid named Tommy, would eat anything as long as it had enough salt. She learned that Ethan was a fair boss, but a hard one. He didn't tolerate laziness or excuses, but he didn't ask for more than he gave. He worked longer hours than anyone, fixed what broke, and never complained. And slowly, grudgingly, the men started to accept her. It started small. Garrett saying good meal one night. Caleb asking if she needed anything from town. Tommy offering to carry the heavy pots. Little gestures that didn't mean much individually, but added up over time. She was still the outsider, still the one they didn't quite trust. But she was part of the ranch now, and that was enough. Until the day everything fell apart. It was a Tuesday, mid-afternoon, when Tommy came tearing into the yard on horseback, his face white with panic. Miss Calloway! Miss Calloway! Rhea dropped the knife she'd been using and hurried to the door. What's wrong? It's Garrett. He fell. He's hurt bad. Her stomach dropped. Where? North pasture, near the creek. He's bleeding real bad, Miss Calloway. We couldn't stop it. Rhea's mind raced. Bleeding. Bad. That could mean anything from a deep cut to something worse. Where's Mr. Voss? Went to Red Bluff this morning. Won't be back till tonight. Damn. Get the wagon, Rhea said. Now. Tommy didn't argue. He ran. Rhea went back inside, her heart pounding. She had no medical training. None. But she'd worked with men for 10 years and she'd seen injuries before. Maybe she could help. Maybe. She grabbed clean towels, a bottle of whiskey, and a sewing kit. Her hands were shaking as she shoved everything into a bag. This was insane. She was a cook, not a doctor. But Garrett was bleeding, and she was the only one here. Tommy pulled up with the wagon, and she climbed in, her legs screaming in protest. They tore out of the yard, the horse moving fast, the wagon jolting over ruts in the road. The north pasture was 15 minutes away, and every second felt like an hour. When they arrived, Rhea saw Garrett lying on the ground, Caleb and another man kneeling beside him. Blood soaked his shirt, dark and spreading. His face was gray. Rhea climbed down from the wagon and limped over, her breath coming fast. What happened? Horse threw him, Caleb said, his voice tight. He landed on a rock, cut his side open. Rhea knelt beside Garrett, ignoring the pain in her leg. She pulled back his shirt and saw the wound, a long, jagged gash across his ribs, deep and bleeding freely. Her hands shook. We need to get him to town, Caleb said. Find a doctor. There's no time. Rhea's voice was steadier than she felt. He'll bleed out before we get there. Then what do we do? Rhea looked at the wound, at Garrett's pale face, at the blood pooling beneath him. She thought about walking away, about saying she couldn't help. But that wasn't an option. If she did nothing, he'd die. She opened the bag and pulled out the whiskey. Hold him down. What are you doing? What I have to. She poured whiskey over the wound. Garrett screamed, his body arching, and Caleb and the other man fought to hold him still. Rhea grabbed a towel and pressed hard, trying to slow the bleeding. Blood soaked through immediately. I need thread, she said, and a needle. You're not serious. Do you have a better idea? Caleb stared at her, then shook his head. No. Rhea threaded the needle with trembling hands. She'd sewn fabric 1,000 times, but never skin. Never a living, bleeding person. But she'd seen it done once, years ago, when a railroad worker got hurt and they couldn't get to a doctor. She pressed the needle to Garrett's skin. Hold him. Caleb gripped Garrett's shoulders. Rhea pushed the needle through, pulling the thread tight. Garrett screamed again, thrashing, and she nearly lost her grip. But she kept going. One stitch. Then another, then another. Her hands were covered in blood. Her vision blurred with sweat. But she didn't stop. By the time she finished, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely tie off the thread. She sat back, breathing hard, and looked at Caleb. We need to get him back. Now. They loaded Garrett into the wagon as gently as they could. He was unconscious now, his breathing shallow. Rhea climbed in beside him, pressing another towel to the wound. Blood seeped through, but slower now. The ride back was a nightmare. Every bump, every jolt, felt like it might kill him. Rhea kept pressure on the wound, whispering things she didn't even remember later. Prayers, curses, promises. By the time they reached the ranch, Ethan was back. He took one look at Garrett and went pale. What happened? He fell, Caleb said. Miss Calloway stitched him up. Ethan's eyes found Rhea. She was covered in blood, her hands shaking, her face white. You did that? I didn't have a choice. Ethan stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Get him inside. We'll need to watch him tonight. They carried Garrett into the bunkhouse and laid him on a cot. Rhea stayed with him, changing the bandages, checking the stitches. She didn't sleep, didn't eat, just sat there, waiting. By morning, Garrett's color had improved. By noon, he was awake. By the end of the day, Rhea knew she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. She wasn't just the cook anymore. She was something else, something the ranch needed, whether they liked it or not. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. Garrett lived. That was the only thing that mattered to Rhea in the days that followed. He lived, and the fever that should have killed him never came. The stitches held, The wound closed, and slowly, painfully, he started to heal. But something else happened that Rhea hadn't expected. The men looked at her differently now. It started the morning after, when she went to the kitchen to start breakfast. Her hand still shook when she thought about the blood, the needle pushing through skin, Garrett's screams. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying every moment, every mistake she might have made. But the work didn't stop for fear or exhaustion, so she lit the stove and got the coffee going. When she carried the first tray to the bunkhouse, the men were already awake. They looked up as she entered, and the room went quiet in a way that felt different from before. Not hostile, not dismissive, something else entirely. Caleb stood up. "Miss Calloway," she set the tray down. "Breakfast is ready." "I wanted to say—" He stopped, his jaw working. "What you did yesterday, that took guts." Rhea didn't know how to respond to that. "I did what needed doing. Most people wouldn't have." He looked around at the other men, and several of them nodded. "We owe you." "You don't owe me anything. Garrett's one of you. Of course I helped." Tommy, sitting near the back, spoke up. "But you didn't have to. You could have said you couldn't do it, that we needed a real doctor." "There wasn't time for a real doctor." Exactly, Ayato," Caleb said. "You made the call, saved his life. That means something." The other men murmured agreement, and Rhea felt heat creep up her neck. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, this kind of acknowledgement. It made her uncomfortable in a way she couldn't name. "Just eat before it gets cold," she said, and left before anyone could say more. But as she walked back to the kitchen, she caught sight of Ethan standing near the barn, watching her. Their eyes met, and he gave a single nod before turning back to his work. It was a small gesture, barely there, but it settled something in her chest that had been restless since yesterday. She'd proven something, not just to them, but to herself. The morning passed in its usual rhythm, but Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that things had shifted. The men talked more at lunch, their voices carrying through the window. Someone laughed. When she brought out the plates, Garrett was sitting up in his cot, his face still pale but his eyes clear. "Heard you're the one who stitched me up," he said when she approached. "That's right. Guess I owe you my life." Rhea set a bowl of soup on the table beside him. "You don't owe me anything. Just heal up so you can get back to work." Garrett looked at the soup, then back at her. "You ever done that before, stitching someone up like that?" "No." His eyebrows went up. "First time?" "First time." He let out a low whistle. "Hell of a first time. Drink your soup." "Yes, ma'am." As she turned to leave, he called after her. "Miss Calloway?" She stopped. "Thank you." Rhea nodded and walked away, but his words followed her. "Thank you." Two simple words she'd heard 1,000 times in her life, but never quite like that. Never with that weight behind them. The afternoon brought its own surprises. She was in the kitchen kneading dough when Ethan came in, his hat in his hands. He stood in the doorway for a moment, like he wasn't sure if he should be there. "Got a minute?" Rhea wiped her hands on her apron. "What do you need?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Wanted to talk about yesterday." Her stomach tightened. "If this is about me overstepping—" "It's not." He leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful. "What you did took nerve. Most people would have frozen up. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You could have said it was too much, that you couldn't do it. No one would have blamed you. I would have blamed me." Ethan studied her for a long moment. "Where'd you learn to do that?" "I didn't. I saw it done once, a long time ago. Figured I could try." "Try." He almost smiled. "You saved his life with try." "I got lucky." "Maybe. Or maybe you're tougher than you look." Rhea didn't know what to say to that. Toughness wasn't something people usually associated with her. They saw the limp, the weight, the way she moved like every step hurt. They didn't see past it, but Ethan did. At least it seemed like he did. "The men respect you now," he said. "That's not easy to earn out here. I didn't do it for respect." "I know. That's why you got it." He put his hat back on and headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here, Miss Calloway." The door closed behind him, and Rhea stood there staring at it, her hands covered in flour and her heart doing something strange in her chest. The days that followed settled into a new kind of normal. Garrett healed faster than anyone expected, his wound closing clean and straight. The stitches held, and by the end of the second week, he was back on his feet, moving slow, but moving. The men treated Rhea with a kind of cautious respect now, like they weren't quite sure what to make of her but knew better than to underestimate her. It should have been a good thing, and in many ways it was, but the town didn't see it that way. Rhea heard the rumors before she saw the consequences. One of the ranch hands came back from a supply run and mentioned that people in Bitter Creek were talking, saying Rhea had no business playing doctor, saying she'd gotten lucky and next time someone might die, saying the ranch was a danger to the whole area with her around. Sheriff Harlan, of course, was leading the charge. Rhea tried to ignore it. She'd dealt with gossip before, but gossip had a way of turning into something worse when the right people got involved. 2 weeks after Garrett's accident, the consequences arrived. Rhea was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard horses in the yard. Too many horses for a normal visitor. She moved to the window and saw Sheriff Harlan and 6 men dismounting, all of them armed. Her stomach dropped. Ethan was already walking toward them, his face hard. Caleb and 2 other men flanked him, their hands resting on their gun belts. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Rhea stepped outside, staying on the porch, but close enough to hear. "Harlan?" Ethan said, his voice flat. "What do you want?" The sheriff smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Got a complaint from some concerned citizens. Seems your cook's been practicing medicine without a license." "She saved a man's life. That's not how the law sees it." "The law can go to hell." Harlan's smile vanished. "You watch your mouth, Voss. I'm here on official business." "Official business?" Ethan's voice was cold. "You mean harassment?" "I mean enforcement. Miss Calloway performed a medical procedure without training or authorization. That's illegal." Rhea felt the words like a punch to the gut. Illegal. She'd saved Garrett's life, and they were calling it illegal. She stepped forward. "He would have died if I hadn't done something." Harlan turned to her, his expression dripping with false concern. "And you could have killed him with your incompetence. You're lucky he survived. Luck had nothing to do with it, didn't it?" Harlan walked closer, his boots heavy on the ground. "You're not a doctor, Miss Calloway. You have no business cutting into people." "I didn't cut into him. I closed a wound." Semantics. He stopped a few feet away, looking her up and down with open contempt. "The fact is, you're a danger. To this ranch, to this town, and to anyone fool enough to trust you." The men behind him murmured agreement, and Rhea felt the heat of their stares. She wanted to scream at them, to make them understand that she'd done the right thing, but she knew it wouldn't matter. They'd already made up their minds. Ethan stepped between them. "You've said your piece. Now leave." "Not yet." Harlan's voice dropped. "I'm here to deliver a warning. Not yet." Harlan's just, "If anyone else gets hurt on this ranch and Miss Calloway tries to play doctor again, I'll have her arrested. And you, Voss, will be held accountable for employing her." "You can't do that. Watch me." Harlan turned to his men. "Let's go." They mounted up and rode off, leaving nothing but dust and fury in their wake. Rhea stood frozen, her hands clenched so tight her nails dug into her palms. She'd saved a life, and they were threatening to arrest her for it. The injustice of it burned like acid in her throat. Ethan turned to her, his face hard. "Don't listen to him." "How can I not? He just threatened to arrest me. He's bluffing." "Is he?" Rhea's voice cracked. "Because it didn't sound like a bluff." Ethan didn't have an answer for that. That night, Rhea couldn't eat. She sat in the kitchen, staring at the wall, her mind racing. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd built here, felt like it was crumbling. The town hated her. The sheriff wanted her gone. And now she was a liability to the one place that had given her a chance. Maybe she should leave, pack her things, disappear, and let Ethan find someone else. Someone who wouldn't bring trouble. Someone who fit. But the thought of leaving made her feel sick. She'd run before, from other places, other judgments, and every time it had felt like losing a piece of herself. She didn't want to run anymore. The door opened and Caleb stepped inside. He looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure if he should be there. "Miss Calloway." She looked up. What is it? The men wanted me to tell you something. He shifted his weight. We don't care what the sheriff says. You saved Garrett. We all saw it. And if anyone else gets hurt, we want you to do what you gotta do. Rhea blinked. You're asking me to break the law. I'm asking you to do what's right. There's a difference. The sheriff doesn't see it that way. The sheriff's an ass. Caleb's voice was blunt. He's been looking for a reason to run you off since you got here. This is just his latest excuse. And if I stay, if something happens and he makes good on his threat, then we deal with it, together. Caleb met her eyes. You're part of this ranch now, Miss Calloway. We don't abandon our own. He left before she could respond, and Rhea sat there feeling something crack open inside her chest. Our own. She'd never been anyone's own before. Never belonged anywhere long enough to matter. But maybe she did now. The next morning, she got up and made breakfast. And the morning after that. And the one after that. She didn't leave, didn't back down, didn't let fear make her decisions. But the pressure kept building. The town cut them off completely. No supplies, no services, nothing. Ethan had to ride to Red Bluff for everything, adding hours to every trip. The general store put up a sign that said, "No service to Voss Ranch personnel." People crossed the street to avoid them when they came to town. And through it all, Sheriff Harlan watched, waiting for his chance. It came 3 weeks later. Rhea was in the kitchen when Tommy burst through the door, his face white. Miss Calloway, we need you. Her heart sank. What happened? It's one of the new hands. Ben, he was fixing the barn roof and fell. His arms busted bad. Rhea's stomach twisted. Where is he? Bunkhouse. She grabbed her bag and followed Tommy across the yard, her mind already running through what she knew about broken bones, which was almost nothing. She'd seen them set before, but never done it herself. Ben was lying on a cot, his face gray with pain. His right arm hung at an unnatural angle, and even from across the room, Rhea could see the break was bad. Ethan was already there, his expression grim. How bad? Rhea knelt beside Ben, gently touching his arm. He hissed in pain. It's broken. Needs to be set. Can you do it? She looked up at him. You know what Harlan said? I don't care what Harlan said. Can you do it? Rhea looked at Ben's arm, at his pale face, at the pain in his eyes. She thought about the sheriff's threat, about arrest and consequences. But then she thought about what Caleb had said. Do what's right. There's a difference. I can try. She'd never set a bone before, but she'd watched it done once at the logging camp. The trick was pulling the bone back into alignment before the muscles seized up too much. It would hurt. Badly. I need something for him to bite on, she said, and someone to hold him down. Caleb handed her a leather strap. Ethan and another man positioned themselves on either side of Ben. Rhea took a breath. This is going to hurt. Ben nodded, his jaw tight. Just do it. She gripped his arm, feeling for the break. Then she pulled. Ben screamed, thrashing against the men holding him. Rhea gritted her teeth and kept pulling, feeling the bone shift, searching for alignment. Sweat poured down her face. Her hands shook. And then, suddenly, she felt it click into place. She let go, breathing hard. Ben's screams faded to ragged gasps. She grabbed splints and bandages, working quickly to immobilize the arm before it could shift again. When she finished, she sat back, her hands trembling. It's set, but he needs to see a real doctor as soon as possible. Ethan nodded. I'll take him to Red Bluff in the morning. Ben looked up at her, his face still pale but his eyes clearer. Thank you. Rhea just nodded. She was too tired to speak, but as she stood to leave, she caught sight of someone in the doorway. One of the men who'd come with Harlan. He'd been watching the whole thing. Her blood ran cold. The man turned and ran for his horse. No, Ethan said quietly. No, no, no. Within an hour, Sheriff Harlan and his men were back. This time, they didn't come to talk. Harlan dismounted, his face hard. Rhea Calloway, you're under arrest for practicing medicine without a license. Rhea stood on the porch, her heart pounding. I was helping someone. You were breaking the law, again. He pulled out a pair of iron shackles. And this time, I've got a witness. Ethan stepped forward. You can't do this. I can and I will. Harlan started toward Rhea. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. But before he could reach the porch, Caleb and 5 other ranch hands stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Their hands rested on their guns, and their faces were set like stone. You're not taking her, Caleb said quietly. Harlan stopped. You're interfering with the law. The law's been interfering with us since she got here. Maybe it's time someone pushed back. The tension snapped tight. Harlan's men reached for their weapons. The ranch hands did the same. Rhea felt the moment hanging on a knife's edge, one wrong move away from violence. Stand down, Ethan said, his voice cutting through the silence. He looked at Harlan. You want her? You go through me first. Harlan smiled. That can be arranged. Can it? Ethan stepped forward. Because I've got 8 men here who'll stand with me. You've got 6. And I'm betting mine are better shots. The sheriff's smile faltered. Here's what's going to happen, Ethan continued. You're going to get back on your horse and ride out of here. And you're going to tell anyone who asks that Miss Calloway is under my protection. I'm the law. You're a bully with a badge, Shaz. Ethan's voice was cold. And you've been pushing for a fight since day one. Well, here it is. You want her? Come and take her. The silence stretched. Rhea couldn't breathe. She'd never seen Ethan like this, hard, dangerous, ready to fight. And he was doing it for her. Finally, Harlan took a step back. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Harlan glared at him, then at Rhea, then at the men standing between them. He knew he was outnumbered, knew that if he pushed this, people would die, and he wasn't ready for that. Not yet. We'll see, he said finally, and turned to mount his horse. His men followed, and they rode off, leaving dust and fury in their wake. The ranch hands didn't move until the sheriff was out of sight. Then, slowly, they lowered their guns. Rhea stood on the porch, shaking. She'd just watched men nearly kill each other over her right to help someone. It was too much. Too big. Ethan turned to her. You all right? No. Her voice cracked. No, I'm not all right. You almost started a war over me. It wouldn't have been over you. It would have been over what's right. That's not how the law sees it. Then the law's wrong. Rhea stared at him. Why are you doing this? Why risk everything for someone like me? Ethan's jaw tightened. Because you're worth it. The words hit her like a physical blow. Worth it. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever stood up for her like this, risked anything for her. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the storm of emotions churning inside her. So she just nodded and walked back into the kitchen before the tears could come. That night, the ranch felt different. Quieter, but charged, like everyone was waiting for the next shoe to drop. The men ate dinner in near silence, their faces thoughtful. When they left, Garrett stayed behind. Miss Calloway. She looked up from the dishes. What? Just wanted to say, what happened today? That took courage. I didn't do anything. You stayed. That's something. He shifted, uncomfortable. I know we didn't make it easy for you when you first got here, but you've proven yourself 10 times over, and we won't forget that. He left before she could respond, and Rhea went back to the dishes with her hands shaking and her eyes burning. She'd come here looking for work, a place to survive, but somewhere along the way it had become something else, something she hadn't expected and didn't know how to handle. It had become home. And now, because of her, that home was under threat. The question was, what was she willing to do to protect it? The answer came sooner than Rhea expected. 3 days after Sheriff Harlan's failed arrest attempt, the town made its next move. And this time, they didn't bother with the law. Rhea was kneading dough when she heard the commotion outside. Voices raised, boots on packed dirt, the nervous whinny of horses. She wiped her hands and moved to the window just as Ethan came striding toward the house, his face dark with anger. She met him at the door. What's wrong? Town council just sent a delegation. They're cutting us off completely. No trade, no supplies, nothing. They're calling it a safety measure. His jaw worked. They want you gone and they'll starve us out if that's what it takes. Rhea felt the floor shift under her feet. They can't do that. They just did. Ethan pulled off his hat and ran a hand through his hair. Harlan's behind it. He got the merchants together, convinced them we're a threat to public safety because of you. Because I helped people. Because you didn't ask permission first. His voice was bitter. They don't care that you saved lives. They care that you made them look useless. Rhea sank into a chair, her mind racing. This was worse than she'd thought, worse than gossip or threats. They were going to force the ranch to fail unless she left. I'll go, she said quietly. What? I'll leave, pack my things and go. You can tell them I'm gone and they'll lift the blockade. Ethan stared at her. You think I'm going to let you do that? You don't have a choice. If I stay, you lose everything. If you leave, we lose more. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, his eyes hard. Listen to me. This ranch survived droughts, winter kills, and a dozen other disasters before you got here. We'll survive this too. Not if they cut you off from supplies. Then we'll find another way. He leaned forward. You think I'm going to cave to a bunch of scared men who can't handle someone different? That's not how I do things. This isn't about pride, Ethan. This is about survival. Exactly. And I'm telling you, we survive better with you here than without you. Rhea wanted to believe him, but she'd seen this before, in other places, other times. She'd watched people lose everything because they stood by her, and every time the guilt had eaten her alive. You don't understand what you're risking, don't I? His voice was quiet now, intense. I'm risking a ranch I've spent 20 years building. I know exactly what's at stake, and I'm still telling you to stay. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Rhea wasn't sure she could unpack. She looked at Ethan's face, at the set of his jaw, the determination in his eyes, and saw something she hadn't expected. He wasn't just defending her out of principle. He actually wanted her to stay. Before she could respond, Caleb appeared in the doorway. Boss, we've got a problem. Ethan stood. What now? Riders coming in from the east. A lot of them. They went outside together, Rhea limping behind. In the distance, she could see dust rising, and beneath it, a line of horsemen. At least a dozen, maybe more. They weren't moving fast, but they weren't stopping either. Who are they? Rhea asked. Don't know. Ethan's hand went to his gun. But I don't like it. The ranch hands were already gathering, armed and ready. Tommy ran to the bell and rang it 3 times, the signal for trouble. Within minutes, every man on the ranch was in the yard, weapons drawn, faces grim. The riders came closer, and Rhea's stomach knotted. She recognized the man in front, Sheriff Harlan. And behind him, townsmen she'd seen before, the store owner, the saloon keeper, others whose names she didn't know, but whose faces she'd never forget. They stopped at the property line just outside the fence. Harlan dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate. When he spoke, his voice carried across the yard. Ethan Voss, we need to talk. We've got nothing to say to you. I think we do. Harlan walked forward until he was at the fence, his hands visible and empty. The town council has made a decision. Miss Calloway is to leave Bitter Creek by sundown tomorrow. If she doesn't, there will be consequences. We've heard your threats before. These aren't threats. They're facts. Harlan pulled a paper from his coat. This is an official order from the territorial governor's office. Miss Calloway is to be removed from the area as a public health hazard. Rhea felt her breath catch. The territorial governor, that was beyond local politics. That was real authority. Ethan's face went hard. Let me see that. Harlan handed the paper through the fence. Ethan read it, his expression darkening with every line. When he finished, he looked up at Harlan with cold fury. This is a fraud. It's signed and sealed. By who? Because I know for a fact the territorial governor doesn't give a damn about one cook on one ranch. He does when that cook endangers public safety. Harlan smiled. You've got until sundown tomorrow. After that, we come in and remove her ourselves. You try that, and we'll defend our property. Then you'll be breaking the law, and I'll have every legal right to arrest all of you. Harlan's smile widened. Is she really worth that, Voss? Worth losing your ranch, your freedom, maybe your life? Ethan didn't answer. He just stood there, the paper crumpled in his fist, rage radiating off him in waves. Harlan mounted his horse. Sundown tomorrow. Make the right choice. They rode off, leaving silence and dread behind. The men gathered around Ethan, their voices low and angry. Rhea stayed back, her hands shaking. This was it, the end. She'd brought this down on them, and now they were going to pay the price. Unless she left. She turned and walked back to the kitchen, ignoring the men calling after her. She went to her small room and pulled out her trunk. It didn't take long to pack. She didn't own much. A few dresses, some personal items, the little bit of money she'd saved. Everything fit easily. She was folding her last dress when Ethan appeared in the doorway. What are you doing? What I should have done weeks ago. She didn't look at him. I'm leaving. No, you're not. Yes, I am. This has gone too far. People are going to get hurt, and I won't have that on my conscience. Ethan stepped into the room. And what about what you have on your conscience if you leave? You think the men will just forget what you did for them? Forget that you saved Garrett's life, set Ben's arm, kept this place running? They'll survive without me. Will they? His voice was sharp. Because I'm not so sure. Rhea finally looked at him. You're being stubborn. Maybe. But I'm also being honest. He moved closer. You think you're a burden. You think people are better off without you. But you're wrong. How can you say that? Look what's happening. The town wants to destroy you because of me. The town wants to destroy us because we're not playing by their rules, because we gave someone a chance who didn't fit their narrow idea of acceptable. He sat on the edge of the cot. You leaving won't fix that. It'll just prove them right. I don't care about proving them wrong. I care about keeping you safe. Then stay. Because if you leave, they win. And I'm not about to let that happen. Rhea wanted to argue, wanted to make him see reason, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He wasn't going to budge, and somewhere deep down beneath all the fear and guilt, she didn't want him to. What's your plan? She asked quietly. I don't have one yet, but we've got until sundown tomorrow to figure it out. That night, the ranch held a meeting in the bunkhouse. All the men gathered around the table, their faces serious. Ethan laid out the situation, holding nothing back. The order from the governor, the threat of arrest, the deadline. When he finished, silence filled the room. Finally, Garrett spoke up. So what do we do? We fight, Caleb said. We don't let them push us around. Fighting means dying, one of the other men said. They've got the law on their side. We'd be outlaws. We're already outlaws in their eyes? That's different from actually being outlaws. The argument went back and forth, voices rising, tempers flaring. Rhea sat in the corner listening, feeling the weight of every word. They were tearing themselves apart over her, and she couldn't stand it. Stop, she said. The room went quiet. She stood, her leg protesting, and faced them. This isn't your fight, it's mine, and I won't let you destroy yourselves for me. It is our fight, Caleb said. You're one of us. I'm not. I'm just the cook. You're more than that, and you know it. Garrett's voice was firm. You saved my life. You helped Ben. You've kept us fed and working through everything the town's thrown at us. That makes you one of us. He's right, Tommy said quietly. We stand together or we fall apart. That's how it works out here. Rhea felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. And if standing together gets you killed, then we die, knowing we did the right thing, Ethan said. But I'm not planning on dying. I'm planning on winning. How? They have the law. They have numbers. They have fear. Ethan's voice was calm, certain. Fear of change, fear of people who don't fit their mold. But fear makes people sloppy, makes them overreach. And when they do, we'll be ready. What does that mean? It means we call their bluff. He stood and walked to the center of the room. That governor's order is fake. I'd bet my ranch on it. Harlan doesn't have the connections to get something like that. And even if he did, no territorial governor would waste time on this. It's a scare tactic. And if you're wrong, then we deal with it. But I'm not wrong. Ethan looked around the room. The question is, are you all with me? One by one, the men nodded, even the ones who'd argued against fighting. They were committed now, for better or worse. Rhea wanted to protest, wanted to beg them to reconsider. But she saw the determination in their faces and knew it would be pointless. They'd made their choice. She just hoped it wouldn't get them killed. The next day crawled by like a wounded animal. Rhea went through the motions of cooking, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept looking out the window, watching the sun move across the sky, counting down the hours until sundown. The men were tense, checking their weapons, positioning themselves around the property. Ethan had sent Tommy to Red Bluff with a message for the territorial marshal, explaining the situation and requesting verification of the governor's order. But Tommy wouldn't be back until tomorrow at the earliest, and they needed answers today. By mid-afternoon, Rhea couldn't take the waiting anymore. She found Ethan in the barn, checking ammunition. "This is insane," she said. He looked up. "Probably. You're going to get yourself killed over a piece of paper that might be fake. If it's fake, we expose Harlan for the fraud he is. If it's real, we fight anyway." He set down the box of cartridges. "Either way, we're not backing down." "Why?" The question came out raw, desperate. "Why does this matter so much to you?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. "Because I'm tired of watching good people get crushed by bad ones. Tired of letting fear and hatred win. And because you deserve better than running for the rest of your life." "You don't know me well enough to say that." "Don't I?" He met her eyes. "I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you saved a man's life with nothing but courage and determination. I know you stayed when any sane person would have left." He paused. "And I know that if you leave now, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life." The words hit Rhea like a physical blow. She stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said, the implications of it, the weight. "Ethan, I'm not asking you for anything," he said quickly. "I'm just telling you the truth. Take it however you want." Before she could respond, Caleb appeared in the doorway. "They're coming." Rhea's heart dropped. She looked past Caleb and saw dust rising in the distance. A lot of it. They walked out together, the three of them, and joined the other men in the yard. The dust cloud grew closer, resolving into shapes. Horses, wagons, at least 20 riders, maybe more. Sheriff Harlan was at the front, and this time he wasn't alone. The entire town council was with him, along with armed deputies and townsmen. They looked like an army. They stopped at the property line, and Harlan dismounted. He pulled out a pocket watch, checked it, and smiled. 15 minutes to sundown, Voss. Where's Miss Calloway?" "Right here." Rhea stepped forward, her chin up despite the fear churning in her gut. Harlan's smile widened. "Good. Then this won't take long. You have two choices. Come with us now, peacefully, or we remove you by force." "Show me the governor's order," Ethan said. "I showed you yesterday." "Show me again. Let everyone here see it." Harlan's smile faltered slightly, but he pulled the paper from his coat and held it up. "Official order, signed and sealed." "By who?" Ethan's voice was hard. "Because I sent a man to Red Bluff to verify it, and I'm betting when he gets back he's going to tell me that order is a fake." The men behind Harlan shifted uncomfortably. Rhea saw doubt flicker across a few faces. Harlan's jaw tightened. "You're stalling! I'm calling you a liar." Ethan took a step forward. "You forged that order because you knew the real governor wouldn't waste time on your petty vendetta. And now you're here with an armed mob to enforce your lie. That's a serious accusation." "Then prove me wrong. Send someone to the territorial office right now. Get confirmation." Harlan's face flushed red. "I don't have to prove anything to you." "Because you can't." Ethan's voice carried across the yard, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That order is fake, and everyone here knows it. You're not acting on behalf of the law. You're acting on behalf of your own hatred." Murmurs rippled through the townsmen. Rhea saw some of them exchanging glances, uncertain now. The store owner looked uncomfortable. Even some of the deputies seemed less sure of themselves. But Harlan wasn't backing down. "Fake or not, we're not leaving without her." "Then you're going to have to go through us." Ethan's hand moved to his gun. Behind him, every ranch hand did the same. The tension snapped taut. Rhea could barely breathe. This was it. The moment everything either fell apart or somehow, impossibly, held together. Harlan's hand moved toward his gun, and then a voice cut through the silence like a knife. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Everyone turned. A man on horseback was approaching from the west, riding fast. As he got closer, Rhea saw the badge on his chest, not a local sheriff's badge, a territorial marshal's badge. The marshal rode into the yard and dismounted, his eyes sweeping over the assembled crowd. He was older than Harlan, with gray hair and a weathered face that had seen too much to be impressed by posturing. "Marshal Dawson," Ethan said, surprise in his voice. "What are you doing here?" "Got a message from your man, Tommy. Thought I'd come see what all the fuss was about." Dawson walked up to Harlan. "Let me see that governor's order." Harlan hesitated, then handed it over. Dawson read it, his expression unchanging. When he finished, he looked up at Harlan with cold eyes. "This is a forgery." The words dropped like stones into water. Ripples of shock spread through the crowd. Harlan went pale. "That's impossible. The governor's signature is wrong, the seal is wrong, and the territorial office has no record of any such order being issued." Dawson's voice was flat, final. "You brought an armed mob onto private property under false pretenses. That's a crime. I was protecting the town. You were abusing your authority." Dawson turned to the crowd. "Anyone who participates in this action is breaking the law. I suggest you all go home before I start making arrests." The townsmen didn't need to be told twice. They started backing away, mounting their horses, muttering excuses. Within minutes, half of them were gone. Harlan stood there, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Dawson stepped closer. "And if I hear about you harassing Miss Calloway or anyone on this ranch again, I'll have you arrested for abuse of power. Are we clear?" Harlan didn't answer. He just turned, mounted his horse, and rode off, the remaining deputies following. The yard emptied quickly, leaving only the marshal, the ranch hands, and Rhea. Dawson turned to Ethan. "You've got yourself quite a situation here." "We manage. I can see that." He looked at Rhea. "You're the cook they're so worked up about?" "Yes, sir." "Heard you saved a man's life, set another's broken arm." "I did what I could." "More than most would have done." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, you've got the law on your side now. Harlan can't touch you without going through me." Rhea felt something break open in her chest. Relief, gratitude, disbelief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank your boss for being smart enough to verify that order." Dawson tipped his hat to Ethan. "You need anything else? You send word." He mounted his horse and rode off, leaving them standing in the fading light of sunset. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Garrett let out a whoop, and suddenly everyone was talking at once, laughing, clapping each other on the back. The tension that had been coiled tight for weeks finally released, and it felt like the whole ranch could breathe again. Rhea stood apart from the celebration, watching them. She should have felt relieved, happy even, but all she felt was exhausted and afraid, because she knew this wasn't really over. Harlan had been humiliated, yes, exposed as a liar and a fraud, but men like that didn't just give up. They got even. Ethan appeared beside her, his face still serious despite the celebration around them. "You all right?" "I don't know." She looked at him. "That was too close. But we won." "Did we? Or did we just make things worse?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Maybe both, but I'd rather fight and win than surrender without trying. And when Harlan comes back, because he will, then we'll deal with it together." That word again, together. Rhea wanted to believe it was possible, that she could actually belong somewhere, be part of something, but years of rejection had taught her not to hope too much. Still, looking at Ethan's face, at the determination in his eyes, she felt something shift inside her, something small and fragile, but real. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The celebration continued into the evening. The men ate dinner with more energy than Rhea had seen in weeks, their voices loud and cheerful. She moved through the work on autopilot, still processing everything that had happened. When she finally finished cleaning and went to her room, she found a note slipped under her door. She picked it up and unfolded it, recognizing Ethan's handwriting immediately. "Thank you for staying. E." 3 simple words. But they meant more than he probably realized. Rhea folded the note carefully and put it in her trunk. Then she lay down on her cot and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. For the first time since arriving at Bitter Creek, she let herself imagine a future here. Not just surviving day to day, but actually building something. Having a place. Belonging. It was a dangerous thing to imagine, but she couldn't help it. Sleep came eventually, heavy and dreamless. And when she woke the next morning, the world felt different, lighter somehow. Like a weight she'd been carrying for years had finally shifted. She got up and started breakfast, falling into the familiar rhythm. But as she worked, she caught herself humming. It was a small thing, barely conscious, but it was the first time she'd hummed in longer than she could remember. Outside, the sun was rising over the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The ranch was waking up, men moving to their morning tasks, cattle lowing in the distance. It looked like home. And maybe, against all odds, it actually was. But peace, Rhea learned, was a temporary thing on the frontier. The first sign of trouble came 2 weeks after Marshal Dawson's visit. Ethan returned from Red Bluff with supplies and a grim expression that made Rhea's stomach tighten before he even spoke. "What happened?" she asked, meeting him at the wagon. He glanced around, making sure they were alone, then lowered his voice. "Harlan's been making noise in town, talking about how the ranch is harboring a dangerous woman, how the marshal was bought off, how we're a threat to everyone." People believe him? Some do, some don't. But he's stirring things up. Ethan started unloading supplies. There's talk of taking matters into their own hands if the law won't. Rhea's hands stilled on the sack of flour she'd been lifting. "What does that mean?" "It means we need to be careful, keep our eyes open." "Maybe I should—" "Don't." Ethan's voice was sharp. "Don't even think about leaving. That's exactly what he wants. And if something happens, if people get hurt because of me, then we deal with it, but we don't give in to threats." He looked at her, his eyes hard. "You're part of this ranch now, Rhea. That doesn't change because some coward is running his mouth in town." It was the first time he'd used her given name. The sound of it in his voice did something strange to her chest, made it hard to breathe properly. "Ethan, I mean it." He picked up a crate and headed toward the house. "We stick together, no matter what comes." She wanted to argue, wanted to make him see that she wasn't worth the risk, but the set of his shoulders told her it would be pointless. He'd made up his mind, and nothing she said would change it. The next few days passed without incident, but the tension never quite left. The men were more watchful, their hands never far from their weapons. At night, someone always stayed awake, keeping guard. The ranch felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Rhea threw herself into the work, trying not to think about the threats hanging over them. She made 3 meals a day, kept the kitchen spotless, and started teaching Tommy how to make bread when he showed interest. The boy was young, barely 19, with more enthusiasm than skill. But he tried hard, and Rhea appreciated that. "Why are you teaching me this, Shay?" Tommy asked one afternoon, his hands covered in flour. "I'm supposed to be punching cattle, not making biscuits." "Because you never know when you'll need to know," Rhea said. "What happens if I get sick or hurt? Someone's got to feed these men, and it might as well be you." Tommy grinned. "You ain't getting sick, Miss Calloway. You're tougher than most of the men here." "Tougher doesn't mean invincible." "Maybe not, but it means something." He shaped the dough into rough circles. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why'd you stay? After everything the town put you through, after Harlan tried to run you off, after all of it, why didn't you just leave?" Rhea was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Because I was tired of running. Tired of letting other people decide where I belonged." "But weren't you scared?" "Terrified. Still am, most days." "Don't look scared to me." "That's because fear and courage aren't opposites, Tommy. Courage is just deciding that whatever you're scared of isn't enough to stop you." The boy thought about that, his young face serious. "I hope I can be that brave someday." "You already are. You're here, aren't you? Standing with us when half the town wants us gone. That takes guts." Tommy's face flushed with pride, and he went back to shaping biscuits with renewed focus. That evening, as Rhea was preparing dinner, Caleb came into the kitchen looking troubled. Miss Calloway, got a minute? What's wrong? He glanced toward the door, then lowered his voice. Some of the men are talking. They're worried. About what? About you. About what might happen if things get worse with the town. He shifted his weight. They're loyal, don't get me wrong. But they got families, some of them, and they're wondering if maybe it wouldn't be easier if I left. Rhea set down the knife she'd been using. You can say it, Caleb. That's not what I think. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. Who's saying it? Couple of the newer hands, the ones who weren't here when you saved Garrett, when you set Ben's arm. They don't know you like we do. Rhea nodded slowly. She couldn't blame them. Fear made people say things they wouldn't otherwise. What do you think I should do? I think you should talk to them. Let them see who you are, because right now, all they know is what the town says about you, and that ain't the truth. So that night, after dinner, Rhea did something she'd never done before. She sat down with the men in the bunkhouse and talked to them. Not as the cook serving food, but as a person, as someone who belonged there as much as any of them. The conversation started awkwardly. The men didn't know what to make of her presence in their space, but gradually, as she answered their questions and told them about her past, the jobs she'd held, the places she'd been, the reasons she'd come to Bitter Creek, they started to relax. So you really stitched up Garrett with no training? One of the new hands asked, a lean man named Pete. No training at all, just desperation and luck. That's insane. Yeah, it was. But he would have died otherwise, so insane seemed like the better option. Pete shook his head. I don't know if I could have done that. You'd be surprised what you can do when there's no other choice, Rhea said. We're all stronger than we think. Another man, older with graying hair, spoke up. My wife's been asking about you, wants to know if the stories are true. What stories? That you're some kind of witch, that you got unnatural abilities. Rhea almost laughed. I'm not a witch, I'm just someone who refuses to quit. There's nothing magical about that. But you saved lives, so do you. Every time you work this ranch, every time you keep it running, you're saving the lives of everyone who depends on it. That's not magic. That's just work. The conversation went on for another hour, and by the end of it, Rhea could see the change in their faces. They looked at her differently now, not with suspicion or fear, but with something closer to respect. When she finally left and walked back to the kitchen, she found Ethan waiting on the porch. That was a good thing you did, he said. How do you know what I did? Caleb told me. Said you went in there and won them over without even trying. I was just being honest. That's why it worked. He stood and walked toward her. You have a way of doing that, making people see past their assumptions. Not everyone. The ones who matter. He paused, and in the moonlight, his face looked different, softer somehow. Can I ask you something? Always. Why did you really stay? Not the reason you told Tommy, but the real reason. Rhea's breath caught. She could lie, deflect, make it about practical things like work and money. But she was tired of hiding. Because of you, she said quietly. Ethan went very still. What? Because you saw me. Not the limp, not the size, not the broken parts. You saw me, and you treated me like I mattered, like I was worth defending. She looked at him, her heart pounding. No one's ever done that before. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Then Ethan took a step closer. You do matter, he said, his voice rough. More than you know. Ethan, let me finish. He took a breath. I've been running this ranch for 20 years, seen men come and go, dealt with droughts and disasters and every kind of hardship. And I thought I knew what mattered. The work, the land, keeping things going. But then you showed up, and suddenly none of that seemed as important as making sure you stayed. Rhea felt tears prick her eyes. Why? Because you reminded me that there's more to life than just surviving, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself care about something. He reached for her hand. I care about you, Rhea. Have for a while now. And I know this is complicated, know we've got enough problems without adding this to the mix. but I can't pretend anymore that it's just about the cooking or the work. The words hung in the air between them, and Rhea felt the world shift. This man, this strong, stubborn man who'd stood against an entire town for her, was offering her something she'd never dared hope for. A future. A real one. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I'm just scared." "So am I, but I'm more scared of not trying." He pulled her into his arms, and Rhea let herself sink into the embrace. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. Cherished. Like maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found where she belonged. They stood like that for a long moment, neither wanting to break the spell. Then Ethan pulled back slightly, just enough to look at her face. "We don't have to figure everything out tonight," he said. "We can take it slow, see where this goes. One day at a time? One day at a time." Rhea nodded, and they stayed on the porch talking until the moon rose high and the ranch settled into sleep. They talked about everything and nothing, their pasts, their fears, their hopes for the future. And with each word, Rhea felt the walls she'd built around her heart crumble a little more. The next few days were different. There was a lightness to them that hadn't been there before. Ethan found excuses to come by the kitchen more often. Rhea caught herself humming while she worked. The men noticed but said nothing, though she saw the knowing looks they exchanged. It should have been a good time, and in many ways it was. But the threat from town hadn't gone away. If anything, it was getting worse. The second warning came on a Thursday. One of the ranch hands found it nailed to the fence post near the road, a crude drawing of a noose with the words "Last Chance" scrawled underneath. Ethan stared at it for a long time, his face unreadable. Then he tore it down and brought it to the bunkhouse. "Everyone needs to see this," he said, holding it up. "This is what we're dealing with. Threats and intimidation from people who think they can scare us into submission." "What do we do about it?" Garrett asked. "We stay alert. We work in pairs when we're away from the main yard. And we don't give them the satisfaction of seeing us afraid." Ethan looked around the room. "Anyone who wants to leave, I understand. No hard feelings. But if you stay knowing what we're up against." Not a single man moved. Caleb spoke up. "We're with you, boss. All the way." The others murmured agreement, and Ethan nodded, his jaw tight with emotion. But Rhea saw the worry in his eyes, saw him checking the perimeter more often, saw him staying up later, sleeping less. The weight of protecting everyone was wearing on him. That night, she found him in the barn, checking weapons by lamplight. "You can't do this alone," she said. He looked up. "I'm not alone. I've got the men." "I mean the worry, the fear that something's going to happen and you won't be able to stop it." She moved closer. "You're carrying all of this on your shoulders, and it's going to break you." "What choice do I have? I'm responsible for everyone here. And who's responsible for you?" Ethan didn't have an answer for that. Rhea sat down beside him on the hay bale. "Let me help. Not just with the cooking, but with all of it. The planning, the worrying, the weight. This isn't your burden. It is if I'm part of this ranch, if I'm part of this—" She gestured between them. "Whatever this is, then your burdens are my burdens." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right, but it goes both ways. Your burdens are mine too." "Deal." They shook hands, a formal gesture that somehow felt more binding than any contract. And from that moment on, they truly were partners. The attack came on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after the noose had been found. Rhea woke to the sound of breaking glass. She bolted upright, her heart hammering, and heard shouting outside. Not the usual night sounds, but chaos. Fear. She grabbed her shawl and ran to the window. What she saw made her blood freeze. Fire. Not the barn this time, but the bunkhouse. Flames were crawling up one wall, and she could see men stumbling out, coughing, disoriented. And around the perimeter, shadowy figures on horseback holding torches. This wasn't just harassment. This was attempted murder. Rhea didn't think. She grabbed the medical bag she now kept ready at all times and ran outside. The yard was chaos, men shouting, grabbing buckets, trying to put out the fire before it spread. But the flames were already high, and the smoke was thick enough to choke on. She saw Ethan near the well, organizing the bucket line. Saw Caleb helping men out of the bunkhouse. Saw the horsemen circling, watching their handiwork. And then she saw the guns come out. The first shot rang out like thunder. One of the horsemen had fired at the bucket line, and suddenly everyone was diving for cover. More shots followed, a barrage of gunfire that turned the ranch into a battlefield. Rhea dropped behind a water trough, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. This was insane. This was war. "Rhea!" Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. "Get back inside!" But she couldn't, because across the yard she saw Tommy go down, clutching his shoulder. Blood was already spreading across his shirt. Without thinking, Rhea ran. Bullets whined past her. Something tugged at her skirt. She didn't stop. She reached Tommy and dropped beside him, her hands already reaching for the wound. "Miss Calloway," he gasped. "Quiet. Let me see." The bullet had gone clean through his shoulder, missing the bone but tearing through muscle. It was bleeding freely, but not arterially. She could work with that. She pressed cloth to the wound, applying pressure. Tommy hissed in pain but didn't pull away. "Can you walk?" "I think so." "Then we need to move. Now." She helped him up, and they half ran, half stumbled toward the house. More shots rang out. Rhea felt something hot graze her arm, but didn't stop. They made it to the porch and through the door, and Rhea kicked it shut behind them. Inside, she laid Tommy on the kitchen table and started working on his wound properly. Her hands were shaking, but they knew what to do. Clean, pack, bandage, keep him alive. The gunfire outside intensified. She heard Ethan shouting orders, heard return fire from the ranch hands. They were fighting back. The door burst open and Garrett stumbled in, supporting another man whose leg was bleeding badly. "Need help? Put him down there." Rhea pointed to the floor near the stove. "I'll get to him as soon as I'm done with Tommy." More wounded came. A man with a head wound that bled like hell but wasn't deep. Another with a hand injury from a ricocheting bullet. A third with burns from fighting the fire. The kitchen became a triage center. Rhea moved between the injured with practiced efficiency now, no longer hesitating, no longer second-guessing. She'd done this before during the last attack, and muscle memory took over. Stop the bleeding, clean the wound, bandage it. Move to the next one. She lost track of time. The gunfire outside seemed to go on forever, punctuated by shouts and the crash of breaking wood. The bunkhouse was fully engulfed now, flames shooting high into the night sky. But the ranch hands were fighting back hard. She could hear it in the rhythm of gunfire, in the shouts of triumph when an attacker fell or retreated. And then, cutting through everything else, she heard a sound that made her heart soar. A bugle. The cavalry call. Marshal Dawson had arrived with reinforcements. The gunfire changed character immediately. The attackers, caught between the ranch's defense and Dawson's deputies, broke and ran. Some didn't make it. She heard horses thundering away, heard men shouting in pursuit. And then, gradually, the chaos died down. Rhea stood at the sink, washing blood off her hands, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and delayed fear. She'd treated 7 men. 7. And she hoped, they'd all live. The door opened and Ethan came in. He was covered in soot and blood, some of it his own from a gash on his arm. But he was alive and standing. Their eyes met across the kitchen, and everything else fell away. Rhea crossed the distance between them and threw her arms around him, holding on like he might disappear if she let go. "You're alive," she whispered. "So are you." His arms tightened around her. "When I saw you run out into the gunfire, I had to. Tommy needed help." "I know. And that's exactly why I love you." The words hit her like a physical blow. She pulled back to look at his face, to see if she'd heard right. "What?" "I love you, Rhea." His voice was steady despite the chaos around them. "I should have said it before, but I'm saying it now. I love you, and I don't want to waste another day pretending I don't." Tears streamed down her face. "I love you too." He kissed her then, hard and desperate and full of all the fear they'd both been carrying. It was a kiss that tasted like smoke and blood and survival. A kiss that said they'd made it through hell together and come out the other side. When they finally pulled apart, Marshal Dawson was standing in the doorway looking uncomfortable. "Sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk." They stepped outside into a scene of devastation. The bunkhouse was gone, burned to the ground. The yard was torn up from bullets and trampling horses. 3 bodies lay near the fence, attackers who hadn't made it out. But the main house stood. The barn stood. And most importantly, all the ranch hands were alive. "We captured 5 of them," Dawson said. "And this time they're not just drifters. These are townsmen, merchants, farmers, people from Bitter Creek. Harlan put them up to it," Ethan said. "Probably, but proving it's going to be harder now that he's in prison." Dawson shook his head. "This has to stop. I'm going to make an example of these men. Make it clear that vigilante justice won't be tolerated." "Will that be enough?" "It'll have to be. Because if it's not, this whole territory is going to tear itself apart." The trials happened fast. The territorial judge came to Red Bluff and heard the case within a week. The evidence was overwhelming. Bullet casings matched to specific guns, witness testimony from ranch hands, and most damning of all, 2 of the captured men confessed in exchange for lighter sentences. They admitted everything. How Harlan had contacted them from prison through intermediaries. How he'd convinced them that the ranch was a threat to decent society. How he'd promised them there would be no consequences if they succeeded in driving Rhea out or burning the place down. The judge sentenced 3 of them to 10 years in prison. The other 2 got 5 years each for cooperating, and he issued a formal decree. Any further harassment of the Voss Ranch would be treated as attempted murder and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was something. In the aftermath, the town of Bitter Creek went quiet. The attacks stopped. The threats stopped. People kept their distance, but the active hostility faded to cold silence. And slowly, painfully, the ranch rebuilt. They constructed a new bunkhouse, bigger and better than the old one. The men who'd lost their possessions in the fire got replacements funded by donations from sympathetic ranchers in neighboring territories who'd heard about the attacks. And through it all, Rhea and Ethan grew closer. They worked side by side every day, planning, building, keeping the ranch running. And every night they sat on the porch talking until the stars came out, learning each other in all the ways that mattered. One evening, about 6 weeks after the attack, Ethan brought up the subject Rhea had been half expecting, half dreading. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About us. About the future." He took her hand. "I know we said we'd take it slow, see where things went, but I think I know where I want them to go." Rhea's heart started to pound. "Where's that?" "I want you to be my wife." There it was. The question she'd been too afraid to hope for. The future she'd never thought she'd have. "Ethan, I know it's fast. I know we've got plenty of reasons to wait. But I also know that life's too short and too uncertain to waste time on caution." He turned to face her fully. "I love you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and know that you're not going anywhere. Will you marry me?" Rhea looked at this man who'd stood by her through everything, who'd defended her when the whole town wanted her gone, who'd seen past every wall she'd built and loved her anyway. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you." Ethan's smile could have lit up the whole sky. He pulled her into his arms and held her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. And for the first time in her life, Rhea believed that maybe she was. They set the wedding for 6 weeks out, which gave them time to rebuild and prepare. But more importantly, it gave the town time to accept what was happening, whether they liked it or not. Rhea threw herself into wedding preparations with the same determination she brought to everything else. She sewed her own dress from fabric Ethan bought in Red Bluff, simple cream-colored cotton that wouldn't draw too much attention, but still made her feel like she was wearing something special. She practiced saying vows in the kitchen when no one was around, her voice stumbling over words like cherish and forever, because they felt too big, too impossible for someone like her. The ranch hands caught her once, standing in front of the water basin using it as a mirror, trying to imagine what she'd look like walking down an aisle. "You're going to look beautiful, Miss Calloway," Tommy said from the doorway. Rhea jumped, her face flushing. "I didn't hear you come in." "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you." He came inside, his shoulders still bandaged but healing well. "Can I say something?" "Of course." "I know you're worried about what people will think, about the town, about all of it." He paused. "But you shouldn't be, because everyone here knows the truth. You're the bravest person any of us have ever met. And the boss, He's getting the best woman in the territory. The words made her throat tight. Thank you, Tommy. I mean it. You saved my life. Saved Garrett's life. Kept this whole place together when it should have fallen apart. He grinned. Plus, you make the best biscuits I've ever had, and that counts for something. Rhea laughed despite the tears in her eyes. Get out of here and tell the others dinner's in an hour. Yes, ma'am. But as the wedding approached, Rhea's anxiety grew. Not about marrying Ethan, she'd never been more certain of anything, but about what came after, about being a wife, about what the town would say, about whether she could actually be what he needed. She confided in Caleb one afternoon while he was helping her carry supplies from the wagon. What if I'm not good enough? She asked quietly. Caleb stopped and looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Not good enough for what? For him, for this life, for any of it. Miss Calloway, Rhea, you stitched up a man's guts with nothing but thread and nerve. You stood in the middle of a gunfight to save Tommy. You turned this kitchen into a hospital and saved 7 men's lives. He set down the sack he was carrying. If that's not good enough, I don't know what is. But being a wife is different than being a cook. Is it? Because seems to me it's all about taking care of people, standing by them when things get hard, and not giving up when it would be easier to quit. He smiled. You've already been doing that. You're just making it official now. The conversation helped, but the nerves didn't fully disappear. They stayed with her through the final preparations, through the last fittings of her dress, through the sleepless night before the ceremony. And then the morning came. They decided to get married at the ranch rather than in town. Partly because Bitter Creek still wasn't entirely welcoming, but mostly because this was where their story had happened, where they'd found each other against all odds. It felt right to start their marriage here. Marshal Dawson arrived early to officiate. He'd gotten licensed as a justice of the peace specifically for this occasion, a gesture that touched Rhea more than she could say. The ranch hands cleaned up and put on their best clothes. Even the cattle seemed to sense something important was happening and kept a respectful distance from the yard. Rhea dressed in her small room, her hands shaking as she buttoned the dress. She'd never worn anything so fine before, never thought she would. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, too delicate for hands that had scrubbed pots and stitched wounds and worked until they bled. But when she looked at herself in the small mirror, she saw something she'd never seen before. A bride. A woman about to marry a man who loved her, not despite her flaws, but with full knowledge of them. There was a knock at the door. Come in. Garrett stepped inside, looking uncomfortable in a pressed shirt and string tie. Boss sent me to see if you were ready. I think so. I'm terrified, but ready. That's normal, I hear. He fidgeted with his hat. Listen, before you go out there, I wanted to say something. All right. When I got hurt, when I was lying there bleeding out, I thought I was dead. Thought that was it. His voice was rough. But you didn't let me die. You fought for me when you had no reason to, when any sane person would have walked away. Garrett, let me finish. What I'm trying to say is you gave me my life back. And not just me, all of us. This whole ranch. You gave us something to believe in. He met her eyes. So if you're worried about whether you're good enough for the boss, stop. Because the truth is we're all lucky to have you, and we're not letting you forget it. Rhea's vision blurred with tears. She crossed the room and hugged him, this big rough man who doubted her at first but had become one of her staunchest defenders. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Now come on, can't keep the boss waiting forever. They walked outside together, Garrett's arm supporting her as she navigated the uneven ground with her bad leg. The ranch hands had set up chairs in the yard and every seat was full, not just with ranch workers but with people from Red Bluff who'd made the trip. The doctor who'd confirmed her work on Marcus was good. Shopkeepers who'd started selling to them again. Even a few families from neighboring ranches who'd heard about the attacks and wanted to show support. And standing at the front, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him, was Ethan. He wore a new shirt and had trimmed his beard. His eyes found hers across the yard and everything else fell away. The people, the ranch, the whole world. There was just him, waiting for her. Rhea walked toward him slowly, her heart so full it hurt. When she reached him, he took her hand and didn't let go. Marshall Dawson cleared his throat. We're gathered here today to join Ethan Voss and Rhea Calloway in marriage. Now, I could give you a long speech about duty and commitment, but I think these two have already proven they understand those things better than most. He smiled. So instead, I'll just ask, Ethan, do you take this woman to be your wife, to stand by her in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live? I do. Ethan's voice was steady, certain. And Rhea, do you take this man to be your husband, to stand by him in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live? Rhea's voice caught. She swallowed hard and said, I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Ethan, you may kiss your bride. Ethan pulled her close and kissed her, and the ranch erupted in cheers. Men whooped and threw their hats in the air. Someone fired a gun in celebration. It was loud and chaotic and perfect. When they finally pulled apart, Rhea was laughing and crying at the same time. Ethan wiped her tears with his thumb. You all right, Mrs. Voss? Mrs. Voss. The name settled over her like a warm blanket. Never better. The celebration lasted well into the night. The men had prepared a feast, or their version of one, anyway. There was beef and beans and fresh bread, and someone had even made a cake, though it was lopsided and slightly burnt. Rhea had never seen anything more beautiful. They ate and drank and told stories. Garrett recounted his accident and how Rhea had saved him, embellishing the details until she sounded like some kind of frontier superhero. Tommy talked about the night of the attack, about how she'd run through gunfire to help him. Even Caleb, who was usually quiet, stood up and gave a short speech about courage and loyalty. I've worked a lot of ranches in my time, he said, his voice carrying across the yard, and I've seen a lot of people come and go. But I've never seen anyone like Rhea. She came here with nothing but a bad leg and a determination not to quit, and she turned this place into something better than it was. Here, here! Someone shouted, and everyone raised their glasses. Rhea sat beside Ethan, her hand in his, feeling more overwhelmed than she'd ever been. These people, these rough, hardened men who'd started out doubting her, had become her family, and they were celebrating her not in spite of who she was, but because of it. When the party finally wound down and the men started heading to their bunks, Ethan and Rhea stayed on the porch, watching the stars come out. This is real, isn't it? Rhea said quietly. I'm not going to wake up and find out it was all a dream. It's real. Ethan pulled her closer. You're stuck with me now. Good, because I don't want to be anywhere else. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together. Finally, Ethan spoke. I know the town hasn't fully accepted us yet, and I know things might still be hard. But I want you to know something. What's that? No matter what comes, no matter what they say or do, you're not alone anymore. You've got me. You've got the men. You've got a home that's yours as much as mine. He turned to face her. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget that. Rhea kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. All the gratitude, all the love, all the hope she'd been afraid to feel for so long. When they finally went inside, the house felt different. It wasn't just Ethan's place anymore. It was theirs. A home they'd built together through blood and fire and sheer stubbornness. The first few months of marriage were an adjustment. Rhea had to learn to share her space, to let someone else into the routine she'd established. Ethan had to remember that he wasn't alone anymore, that he had a partner to consult and consider. They fought sometimes. About small things mostly, how to organize the kitchen, whether to hire more hands, how much to spend on supplies. But they also learned how to fight fair, how to listen to each other, how to compromise without either of them feeling like they'd lost. And through it all, the ranch thrived. Word spread about what had happened, about the attacks, about Rhea's medical work, about the stand they'd made. Other ranchers started reaching out, offering support and solidarity. Some even sent hands their way, men who'd been rejected elsewhere for being different or damaged and wanted a place where that didn't matter. 6 months after the wedding, a young man showed up asking for work. He had a clubfoot and walked with a cane, and he was one of the best ropers Rhea had ever seen. Heard you give people chances here, he said to Ethan. That true? Ethan looked at Rhea, and she nodded. It's true, Ethan said. You willing to work hard? Harder than anyone you've ever met. Then you're hired. Rhea will show you to the bunkhouse. As the young man limped away, clearly trying not to show how relieved he was, Ethan turned to Rhea. We're building something here, aren't we? Something bigger than just a ranch. Yeah, Rhea said. I think we are. Because that's what they'd done without really planning it. They'd created a place where people who didn't fit anywhere else could belong, where broken didn't mean useless and different didn't mean wrong. It wasn't always easy. Some of the men struggled with their limitations. Some left when they realized the work was harder than they'd expected. But most stayed. And the ones who stayed became fiercely loyal, bound together by the knowledge that this was the only place that had ever wanted them. The town of Bitter Creek eventually came around, though it took longer than Rhea would have liked. The turning point came almost a year after the wedding, when a fever swept through the area. It started in town and spread fast. Within days, half of Bitter Creek was sick. The doctor was overwhelmed, struggling to care for everyone. People were dying, and fear was spreading faster than the fever itself. And then someone from town came to the ranch asking for help. It was the store owner, the same man who'd refused to sell to Rhea when she first arrived. He stood at the property line, hat in hand, looking ashamed. We need help, he said to Ethan. The fever's bad and Doc Williams can't handle it alone. What kind of help? Someone who knows medicine, someone who can... He looked at Rhea. Someone like your wife. Rhea felt Ethan tense beside her. After everything the town had done, they had nerve asking for help now. Why should we help you? Ethan's voice was cold. After you tried to burn us out? After you drove Harlan's mob to attack us? Because people are dying. The store owner's voice broke. My daughter is sick. My wife. Half the town is burning up with fever, and we don't know what to do. Rhea looked at Ethan and saw the conflict in his eyes. Part of him wanted to refuse, wanted to let them suffer the way they'd made her suffer. And she couldn't blame him for that. But Rhea had learned something over the past year. Holding on to hate and anger only poisoned you, and she'd been poisoned enough for one lifetime. I'll go, she said. Rhea, I have to. Not because they deserve it, but because people are dying. Children are dying. And I can't live with myself if I don't at least try to help. Ethan studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. If you go, I go with you. We're not taking any chances. They loaded a wagon with medical supplies and headed into town. What they found was worse than Rhea had expected. The streets were eerily quiet. Houses were dark except for the ones where lamplight flickered in sick rooms. The smell of sickness hung in the air. Doc Williams met them at his office, looking exhausted and grateful. Thank you for coming. I know it's asking a lot after everything that's happened. Where do you need us? Rhea asked, already rolling up her sleeves. Everywhere. The fever's hitting hardest in the east side of town. Whole families down at once. They worked for 3 days straight. Rhea went from house to house, checking fevers, giving medicine, doing everything she could to ease suffering. She taught people how to bring down temperatures with cool cloths, how to keep the sick hydrated, how to watch for signs of complications. Some of the people she treated were the same ones who'd scorned her, who'd crossed the street to avoid her, who'd demanded she leave town, but she treated them all the same, with care and competence, and no hint of judgment. And slowly, people noticed. By the 4th day, the fever had peaked and started to recede. The death toll was lower than it should have been, and Doc Williams credited Rhea's quick response and tireless work. You saved this town, he said to her. We'd have lost twice as many without you. I just did what needed doing. That's more than most would have done, especially after how we treated you. He looked ashamed. I owe you an apology. We all do. Rhea was quiet for a moment, then she said, I don't need apologies. I just need you to do better, to be better, to remember that everyone deserves a chance, no matter how they look or where they come from. The doctor nodded. We will. I promise you that. When Rhea and Ethan finally headed back to the ranch, exhausted and filthy, they found a crowd waiting at the property line. Townspeople, dozens of them, standing in the road. Rhea's first instinct was fear, but as they got closer, she realized they weren't there to threaten. They were there to thank. The store owner stepped forward, his daughter beside him. We wanted to say, to tell you, he struggled for words. We were wrong about you, about everything, and we're sorry. Others echoed the sentiment, people she'd treated, people who'd been saved because she'd come to help despite having every reason not to. We'd like to make it right, someone said. If you'll let us. Rhea looked at their faces and saw genuine remorse. It didn't erase what had happened, didn't undo the attacks or the threats or the fear. But it was something. The best way to make it right is to learn from it, she said. To be kinder, to give people chances, to remember that everyone has value, even if they don't look like what you expect. They nodded, some of them with tears in their eyes. After that, things changed. The town opened up to the ranch in ways it never had before. People started coming out to visit, to see the operation, to meet the men who worked there. They stopped seeing Rhea as a threat and started seeing her as what she'd always been, a person doing her best in a world that often didn't make it easy. Business picked up. Ethan started getting contracts he'd never had access to before. The ranch expanded, and with it, their ability to hire more people who needed a second chance. 2 years after the wedding, Rhea stood in the kitchen teaching a new cook, a woman with a scarred face from a fire who'd been turned away from every other job in the territory, how to make the ranch's signature biscuits. The secret is not to overwork the dough, Rhea said. You want it just mixed enough to hold together. The woman, whose name was Clara, watched intently. How do you know when it's ready? You feel it. Here, try. As Clara worked the dough, Rhea looked around the kitchen. It was bigger now, expanded to accommodate the growing number of people they fed. Shelves were stocked with supplies from town, delivered regularly without incident. Through the window, she could see the ranch bustling with activity, men working, horses being trained, cattle being moved to fresh pasture. It was thriving. They were thriving. Ethan came in for his afternoon coffee, a ritual they'd established early in their marriage. He kissed her cheek and nodded to Clara. How's the lesson going? Good, Rhea said. Clara's a natural. Glad to hear it. He poured his coffee and leaned against the counter. Got news from Red Bluff. Marshal Dawson says Harlan died in prison last week. Rhea felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief, mostly, but also something that might have been pity. How? Fever, ironically enough. Same one that hit Bitter Creek. They were quiet for a moment, processing. The man who'd tried so hard to destroy them was gone. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt sad. I won't miss him, Ethan said finally. But I'm not going to celebrate either. He was a broken person who broke others. That's tragedy, not triumph. Rhea nodded. At least it's over. Really over. Yeah. He took her hand. And we can focus on the future now. Speaking of which, I wanted to talk to you about something. What's that? I've been thinking we should formalize what we're doing here. Make it official that this ranch is a place for second chances. Maybe even set up a fund to help people get on their feet when they arrive. Like a charity? More like a mission. We've already been doing it informally. Why not make it part of who we are? Rhea thought about it. Thought about all the people who'd come through their doors looking for work and finding family. Thought about Tommy and Garrett and all the others who'd become more than just employees. I think that's a wonderful idea. They spent the next several months setting it up properly. They drafted a charter, established guidelines, and even got the territorial government to recognize their effort officially. The Voss Ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where anyone willing to work hard could find a home, regardless of their past or their limitations. Applications started coming in from all over, more than they could possibly accommodate. But they did their best, taking in as many as they could, finding placements at other sympathetic ranches for those they couldn't hire directly. And with each person they helped, Rhea felt a piece of her own past heal. Every person she gave a chance was someone who wouldn't have to feel the rejection she'd felt. Every success story was proof that the world could be different if people just tried. 3 years after the wedding, on a crisp fall morning, Rhea was in the kitchen when a young woman appeared at the door. She was thin, painfully so, with a twisted spine that made her stand at an angle. Her eyes held the same defensive wariness Rhea recognized from her own mirror years ago. I heard you might be hiring, the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. Rhea set down the pan she'd been scrubbing and really looked at her. Saw the fear and hope mixed together. Saw the expectation of rejection. What's your name? Sarah. Well, Sarah, come in. Let's talk. Sarah stepped inside hesitantly, like she was afraid the offer would be rescinded. I can work. I know I don't look like much, but I'm strong. I can cook some, and I'm willing to learn whatever you need. Can you show up on time and work hard? Yes, ma'am. Then you're hired. Sarah's eyes went wide. Just like that? You don't want to think about it? Talk to someone else? No need. If you're willing to work, you've got a place here. Rhea smiled. Now, let me show you around. We'll get you set up in the bunkhouse. There's a women's section now. We added it last year, and then I'll introduce you to the others. As Sarah followed her through the ranch, chattering nervously about her experience and asking 1,000 questions, Rhea caught Ethan's eye across the yard. He was smiling, that quiet smile that said he understood exactly what she was doing, giving someone else what she'd been given. A chance, a home, a future. That evening, after Sarah had been settled and the day's work was done, Rhea and Ethan sat on their porch watching the sunset. It had become their favorite time of day, these quiet moments when they could just be together. You did a good thing today, Ethan said. I did what you did for me. And what's that? Saw past the surface to the person underneath. She leaned into him. You changed my life, Ethan. Let me build something real. And now I get to do the same for others. We do it together. Yes, together. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. Voices from the bunkhouse, horses in the corral, the distant sound of cattle. It was messy and imperfect and sometimes chaotic, but it was theirs, built on the principle that everyone deserved a chance and that broken didn't mean worthless. You know what I realized today? Rhea said. What's that? I spent so many years running from places that didn't want me, convinced that I was the problem, that I didn't deserve to belong anywhere. She turned to look at him. But you taught me something different. You taught me that it wasn't about deserving or earning. It was about finding people who saw you for who you really are and choosing to stay. And what are you? Who you really are? Rhea thought about it. Once she would have defined herself by her limitations, the bad leg, the weight, the injuries and rejections, but not anymore. I'm someone who refuses to quit, someone who fights for people who can't fight for themselves, someone who believes that kindness matters more than perfection. She smiled. I'm Rhea Voss, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Ethan pulled her close. Yes, you are. 5 years after that first day when she'd arrived at Bitter Creek, broken and desperate and convinced she'd never belong anywhere, Rhea stood in the yard of the Voss Ranch surrounded by people she'd helped. The ranch had grown to employ 23 people, each one with their own story of rejection and redemption. They were hosting a celebration, partly for the ranch's success, partly just because they could. Tables were loaded with food. Music played. People laughed and danced and told stories. Garrett was there with his wife and new baby, a little girl they'd named Rhea in honor of the woman who'd saved his life. Tommy had become the ranch foreman, grown into a confident young man who ran the operation with skill and fairness. Caleb had finally married the woman he'd been courting for years, and they'd settled in a house at the edge of the property. And Sarah, nervous, broken Sarah who'd shown up 3 years ago expecting rejection, was teaching 2 new hires how to handle the kitchen when Rhea was busy with other things. It was everything Rhea had never dared to dream of. A home, a family, a purpose bigger than just survival. She felt Ethan's arm around her waist and leaned into him. What are you thinking about? He asked. How far we've come, how different things are now. Any regrets? None. Well, maybe one. What's that? I wish I'd come here sooner. Wish I'd found you years ago. Ethan shook his head. No, you came exactly when you were supposed to. Any earlier and neither of us would have been ready. You needed to go through what you went through to become who you are. and I needed to be knocked down a few times to appreciate what really matters. He was right. Every rejection, every hardship, every moment of pain had led her here, had taught her something she needed to know, had made her strong enough to build something that mattered. Besides, Ethan continued, think about all the people we've helped because of your experience. You understand them because you've been where they are. That's not something you can fake or learn from a book. Rhea looked around at all the faces, at the people who'd found refuge here, who'd been given chances they'd never had before, at the life they'd built together from nothing but determination and stubborn hope. We did this, she said quietly. We actually did this. We're still doing it, and we'll keep doing it as long as there are people who need help. That night, long after the celebration had ended and everyone had gone to bed, Rhea sat at the kitchen table writing in the journal she'd started keeping. She wanted to remember this, all of it, the good and the bad, the fear and the triumph. She wrote about arriving at Bitter Creek, broken and expecting rejection, about Ethan giving her a chance when no one else would, about saving Garrett's life and realizing she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined, about the attacks, the fear, the fight to survive. And she wrote about what came after, the wedding, the growth, the dozens of people they'd helped over the years, the way the ranch had become something bigger than just a business. It had become a movement, a proof that the world could be different if people just tried. Finally, she wrote, I used to think strength meant not having any weaknesses, that being whole meant being perfect. But I was wrong. Real strength is acknowledging your limitations and refusing to let them define you. Being whole means accepting every part of yourself, the broken and the beautiful, and moving forward anyway. I came to this place with nothing but a bad leg and a determination not to quit, and I found everything I never knew I needed. A home, a family, a purpose, love. The woman they called a cripple became the backbone of a ranch. The cook they didn't want became the person who held everything together. And the future I never thought I'd have became more beautiful than I could have imagined. This is my story. Not a tragedy about brokenness, but a triumph about refusing to break. And I'm writing it down so that anyone else who feels unwanted, unloved, or unworthy can read it and know you are enough, exactly as you are. You just need to find your people and build your place. The rest will follow. She closed the journal and sat back, feeling a profound sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be more people to help, more problems to solve, more battles to fight. But tonight, she could rest in the knowledge that she'd done something that mattered. She'd proven that a person's worth wasn't measured by how they looked or how they moved, but by the content of their character and the strength of their heart. She'd built a home where everyone belonged, and she'd learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the places that reject you aren't the ones you're meant to find. Sometimes you have to keep searching until you discover the people who see you for who you really are. And when you find them, you hold on tight and build something beautiful together. Rhea Voss, once Rhea Calloway, the unwanted cook, had done exactly that. And she was just getting started.